Welcome back to another episode. So this time we're going to go back into looking in the menu system of the Pentax K-3 Mark III. I did do a preliminary video when I had had the camera for a little bit, and it was a 23-minute long video going somewhat in depth of the entire menu system itself and how to set up the camera when you first get it before you go out to shoot and things to look out for. And I shared some of the settings that I use. I got into the smart function. I'm going to do things a little differently because I realized that it's one thing to talk about the menu and show, option A, B, C, D, and then just leaving it at that. So what I'm going to do this time is, as we go through the menu, I'm going to actually show what those changes within the menu actually translate to in the real world when you actually go to take photos. So things like linking the auto exposure with the autofocus point, turning that on versus turning that off. What does it actually do? The different options in regards to the OVF shooting experience with the autofocus. There's a ton of options in regards to the autofocus system now for the OVF. Live view doesn't really have many options, even compared to the previous generation of Pentax cameras. It's still somewhat the same. But the real experience here with the Pentax K3 Mark III is the actual OVF. So with that said, it's going to be a different video. I'm going to be breaking it down section by section. So we're not going to go through a gazillion things in one video to make it a 45-minute video. It's just going to be section A, autofocus. Here's what it does. Here's how it translates. And then that'll be the end, because that'll be long enough. And so anyway, from there, showing you, like I said, the differences when you make those changes and how it translates into you actually within your shooting experience itself. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's just get into the menu and let's go. Oh, wait, right. Full-time continuous autofocus in video in 4K on a Pentax camera. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Come on, come on. All right, the autofocus tracking is not the absolute greatest, but it's a lot better than it used to be. Okay, so to start things off, we're going to look at the autofocus shooting with the OVF, or optical viewfinder. So in the menu, the very first option you have here, focus settings, number one, camera. Well, camera number one is autofocus with viewfinder. So the way this works is you'll have two options right off the beginning: single autofocus and continuous autofocus. With single autofocus, what you're doing is you're setting the default parameter when you turn on the camera. So let's back out of this, and you'll see here it's showing AFS. If we go back in here, you'll see that the autofocus mode with the viewfinder is actually set to single autofocus, which is AFS. So if we change that to continuous, then what you'll notice is the autofocus mode, when we back out of all this, is now AFC. So let's turn the camera off, turn it back on, and you'll notice it's still in AFC. So let's go back, turn this to single autofocus, back out, turn the camera off, turn the camera back on, and you'll see it's still AFS. So you're just setting the default parameter for the modes that you're in. Now, when you do set up a custom user mode, that will actually change because it'll save whatever settings you have at that moment into the custom user mode. Not sure why this is acting kind of weird. It's not quite focusing the way it was 2 seconds ago. So the next one is autofocus active area. There's a lot of options in here. You've got your auto area, which is a full automatic autofocus system. It basically takes, I'd say, about 85% of the entire scene. It just litters it with focus point capability, and the camera will focus on whatever it deems is correct. You have no control over that. Zone focus is a smaller area that you can actually move around. So let's just see what this looks like. So this is full auto. So it's every single autofocus point. You can't change anything. You can't move anything around. Let's go and change this to zone. And in zone autofocus, you'll see it's a smaller area that you can now move around. It's still a fully automatic mode. So the camera is still going to determine what to focus on in that little area. I will show what that looks like in the viewfinder. Okay, so here is full autofocus in the viewfinder, and pay close attention to where the black squares show up in the frame. So you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of them all over the place. Now I'm going to do the same focus, and you'll notice the black squares change again. Now notice again, they're different. So the camera is picking whatever it feels is the best place to actually focus on. So now let's move on to zone autofocus. Now you'll notice in zone autofocus, it's a concentration of focus points more in the center of the frame. And you'll notice again, see when I do go to focus, the squares change. And you can adjust it by moving the joystick off to the side a bit there. See what that looks like. And you'll notice it's off to the side of Frida Frog. So in order to get back out of that, you can, I believe, you just press the joystick in and it recenters the whole thing. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, so here we have select autofocus, which is pretty much, as expected. It's just one section of autofocus points that you can move all the way across. This one is grouped. It does have a slight grouping to it, and that basically looks like this. Eventually. There we go. So just 5 squares in the center, and that's it. And then from there, the camera will determine where to actually place the focus using that center area. So if you want a slightly wider area than spot focus, then this would be the selection that you would want to do. Now you'll notice here, expanded autofocus is grayed out, expanded autofocus medium. So small, medium, large are all grayed out. And now we have the small select autofocus. The reason why the expanded areas are grayed out is you need to be in AFC, continuous autofocus, to take advantage of the expanded area modes. So the camera will lock out certain things depending on what your current drive mode and settings are, as well as options for movie. You need to be in the movie mode in order for those options to appear. It's a little counterintuitive at first, but it makes sense once you actually start using it. You only get the options that you need for the specific mode that you're actually in. But anyway, all right, so let's take a look at select, the small select. So you'll notice it's now a single dot that you can move all the way across, all over the place. And that looks like this. Just a single dot. Just move this over. Now remember, I am in AFS, so if you do see the LED blinking, it's because I'm in AFS. It does not work in AFC. Now let's move on to the next one, which is spot. Now, spot is similar to the select small that I just showed you. However, you cannot move this one at all. You cannot move it. I'm moving it around and it doesn't move. It's literally just dead center. It's a very, very thin autofocus point, so it's easy to be able to actually shoot through branches and things like that if you're doing birding and things of that nature. Yeah, so that's the autofocus through the viewfinder. Okay, and for this next one, autofocus area restriction, I put the camera back on full autofocus to show you exactly what this does. So autofocus restriction excludes the left and right areas from available areas as the autofocus activator. It's very convoluted the way they worded this. It must have been a translation thing. Basically what it's saying is the two outer rows of autofocus points are disabled. So let's turn that on and I'll show you what that looks like on the rear LCD. So you'll see it's a square, right? Now let's go back and turn that off so you get the full array of autofocus points. And you'll notice that there's these two lines on each side, right? So that's what the restricted area actually does. Oops, let's go back. I just want to see here. I don't think it restricts zone. Okay, yes it does. It restricts where you can move the zone area to. Right, so now you have a very, very small area to work with versus, turn that off, and now you have this much to be able to work with moving the zone of autofocus around. So it can be useful. It does have its uses. You know, a lot of this, it's a lot of different settings on this camera. It's, yeah. So you got your focus priority and release priority as usual for AFS settings. First frame action in AFC. Now this is where things are a little different. So one of my subscribers actually reached out to Rico Imaging, and they actually gave him a rundown on the best settings for autofocus for action. And I cross-referenced this with Nikon as well as Sony and Canon. I found it very interesting that release priority is actually a better option in AFC due to the speed that the camera can autofocus. So focus priority will actually delay your ability to get the photo. You may get the first shot, but then the second, third may not quite come out right. With release priority set, because of the speed the camera can now focus on, you may miss the first shot, but the next sequence of shots should all be pretty much in focus. So I thought that was very interesting. I did change it and set it as a custom user mode. You know, I saved it, to my custom user setting, and it actually did make a pretty big difference. I was very, very, very surprised. It's counterintuitive, but it actually does work. So I'm changing this actually to these as the defaults. And remember, these are all going to be your defaults when you're in whichever mode. So right now I'm in manual mode. So these would all become my manual mode defaults. Every time you turn on the camera, this is what it's going to pick up. So autofocus action when autofocus fails. You can either have the lens completely stop, or you can have the camera continuously try to drive the lens to reacquire focus. I did play with this. The stopping the lens, the only issue I ran into is if something is way out of focus when you initially try to start shooting, the lens doesn't move. So I found that a little aggravating. You need to make sure you're at least close to the focal plane, and then you have no issues. But if you're way out and it's super blurred, the camera won't even try to focus. Let's see here. So autofocus point tracking in AFC. This is, I always leave this on. It just gives a better result. It's part of the subject recognition algorithm. Uses both the autofocus and auto exposure sensor information to track the autofocus points. So it basically feeds data from the RGB IR sensor. So you get an extra 307,000 pixels of autofocus capability that then gets fed to the autofocus module, which allows the camera to better predict where the subject is going to be. And type 2 is it basically just uses the standard autofocus system without the added benefit of the auto exposure system. And you have your subject recognition. So this is basically for you know, recognizing eyes and stuff like that. Uses subject recognition information to determine the autofocus point when starting autofocus in auto area or zone select. So this only works in either full auto or zone select. Now I'm going to actually do something here. Let's see. Unlock the lens. Let me zoom in. Let's see. You good? You good there, Frida? You good? You good? All right. Yeah, I think you're good. I think you're good. All right. So let's change this to full auto. Whoops. Sorry. Trying to look at the screen here. So let's move you to full auto area. And so subject recognition is on. And let's take a shot of Frida here. And it seems that it's randomly placing. Okay, I think I'm I'm outside the active area. So let me just adjust the camera here quickly. All right, there we go. Now should be within the frame. It's a little bit better there. Let's try to get the center here. And it doesn't seem like it's picking up Frida's eyes. It's interesting because yesterday I was testing this out and it was working. All right, let's see what it actually picked up. So that's the initial focus point, and there's dead center. Let's zoom this out a little bit here. See how this goes. Remember, this is full auto. Okay, now let's see. Zoom in. Nope. That's dead center. Let's go to the next one. And that one did try to pick up an eye. And that's dead center. Next one. Nope, just the fur. Didn't quite do it. Yeah, so I go back to my thing. It is a little inconsistent. It does work, but it is still inconsistent, unfortunately. And all right, so I'm going to leave that off with the shooting with, that's pretty much it. Oh, and then catch and focus for the manual lenses, which is exactly the same as every other Pentax camera before the K-3 Mark III. And yeah, so I'm just going to stop it there. That is the autofocus settings in regards to AFS. Well, sorry, not AFS, but the viewfinder experience with the K-3 Mark III. So there you have it. Later on in this series of videos, because it's not going to be just one video, it will be a series, I will actually go through what the differences in these different modes actually do. I don't want to include that in these videos because these videos would be very long. I mean, this one's already, what, over 15 minutes, about 16 minutes or so. So, yeah, but there is a lot to cover. But I will go through, showing what the various modes actually translate to in regards to actually shooting. But yeah, if you like the video, leave a like. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. Helps me out. If you'd like to support the channel, I leave that information at the bottom of the description. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And that's it. You'll see me on the next video. I'm out.